how AI has really, again, this was something that was in place, but during the pandemic, it's even taken a larger role, and it's really, cut anyone who's been out of the workplace for a couple of months. If you have any gap in employment, that just pushes you out. And also, things like older workers are used to, we're told not to plagiarize and all these sorts of things. I would lose my job if I did that. But you have to take exactly what it says in that job description and put it right into your resume. Just cut and paste. Or,
do younger workers know to do that?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
They're trained to do that.
They know exactly. They don't care. Yeah, they know. They take things from Wikipedia as it is. They don't care.
So let me just put it in like really basic terms. I think there's a pickle jar problem here, and I think there's a Goldilocks problem here. Okay?
I'm intrigued.
Let's hear it.
So, how many of you have tried to open a pickle jar before? It's nearly impossible. And I'm a relatively strong guy. You have to bang it. The pickle jar was designed by young men. So everyone else is excluded from the design of that product. The same goes for AI. AI, the digital world, has basically been designed by young white men. And it continues to be that way. In fact, in Silicon Valley, for all of the outcry you hear about sexism and racism in Silicon Valley, ageism is the #1 issue that faces that economy there. And complaints are through the roof. The second is we have this weird Goldilocks problem when it comes to employment. Not too experienced, not too underexperienced, not too fresh, not too old. All of these stuff kind of fits in, and it's funny. I talk to managers all the time about this, and they're like, we can't even see the quality candidates because HR says this person is overqualified.
So
or this person is underqualified.
And if you can't get in as an older worker to that interview, if you can't actually meet a human, and the machine cuts you off like before you even have that opportunity to even have somebody eyeball it or human eyeball it, and if you can't get in, how do you sell experience? How do you sell what you really bring to the job beyond the specific skill? It's a whole, because what you sell at this age is much more than that little skill that's on that computerized AI program.
But do you think, because you both seem to think, I am not so sure, that that labor shortages will push employers to then look at these older candidates differently?
They're just not going to have a choice. They're just not going to have a choice. They're going to have two options. One is to expand the labor pool to include older generations. That's option one. Option two is to automate.
Mm-hmm. And that's expensive.
And that's expensive.
And more expensive.
More expensive than people realize.
So we hear all this talk about the Great Resignation, the big quit.
Yeah.
How does this factor in? First of all, are older workers part of it? And we've there's a great quote from Next for You's own Jeff Tidwell in Kerry's book, talking about the psychological reset that's happened, and that it's happened a lot for older workers. The life is short phenomenon that we're experiencing as a result of the pandemic. I certainly feel that. I hear my friends talk about it. I'm not sure how it plays out practically in real life and the implications for older workers.
Well, I think that the important thing to remember is, yes, I think in fact people had a lot of time to say, I just don't want it, that the pressures from working at home and the stress of it and all that, a lot of people say, I just don't want to deal with it anymore, or I don't feel valued. They didn't learn to draw the boundaries with their boss. The boss didn't draw that boundary with them. People were just burned out, and just at all ages, but older workers in particular, like, do I need this anymore? And I think there was a big quit, definitely impacted when they had the opportunity to take a package. They're like, yeah, why not? I'm just over this. And so I think that was part of it, and I'm going to let Bradley get into his part, but the one quick thing I want to say that concerns, it's so foolish. It is so foolish, because from a financial standpoint, and I write a lot about personal finance, for future financial security, it's a fool's decision to step out of the workplace, because when you've got a couple of decades to finance moving down the road, and if you look at Fidelity runs these numbers every so often about what your medical care costs. Everyone thinks, oh, Medicare was it's not gonna cover much, to be honest with you. And when you have, they say something like a couple at 62, it's $300,000 after tax for, at the age of 62, retired, for what you can expect to pay in medical costs, healthcare costs, and it can change obviously on lots of factors, but most people don't have money saved for retirement that's even near that to support stuff like that. So I think people think that it's they've had enough, I'm out, but they don't see that long picture, that trying to finance living longer lives is just, it's not a viable option. I think
But Kerry is spot on with the assessment of people not understanding the reality of walking away. You know, older workers don't have an easy reentry.
Mm-hmm.
And there are barriers, even with the way Social Security is computed about getting back in. People are afraid of disrupting their payments, their Social Security payments. And so there's a lot of stuff that folks just don't.
And Social Security pays for very little.
Very little.
But again, Bradley, the other point that we should make here is we're talking, when we talk about people who are invested in the stock market, and believe me, I was pleased about that. But there are a huge swath of older workers in America that do not have equity holdings. They did not benefit from this run up in the markets.
Yes, you're absolutely
So, you know, it's easy to talk about sort of our elite group that says, you know, yeah, I have retirement savings, I've got this income, but there is this other bunch of people that I think the stress and the demands of caregiving and the work, they did do the big resignation, they did do the big quit, because they simply couldn't take it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe that's not this cavalier attitude, I'm quitting because I'm over it, it's I'm quitting because I can't take it.
So let me ask you, you know, think big and bold.
Yeah.
Like, let's not talk about, you know, what is the biggest, boldest action that you would want government, companies, or what's the biggest thing we can do to help move the needle?
The number one thing that a very small number of people are talking about right now, but I think is the single greatest thing that we can do as a government, is to offer people a pensions pause. So if you're contributing to your pension, your Social Security for your lifetime, and you were displaced because of a technological shift, if you were displaced because you've been made redundant, you should be able to stop paying into Social Security, be able to draw on your Social Security or your retirement investments for a period of time where you go back to school or trade school or university, whatever you want to look at it as, learn a new skill so you can get back and re-enter the workforce. I think that I've seen this personally, people who've been displaced midlife, and they have no idea where to start, and it's all on them. So giving people that financial kind of cushion, that protection, while getting them reskilled for a new job that meets the demands of the modern economy, I think that's revolutionary.
I think that's a fabulous idea. I think that's really good. Diane?
Wait, I'm sorry. How would that work? I mean.
So I would treat
You don't
it.
get penalized for tapping into your retirement.
You wouldn't get penalized for tapping
Right.
into it, and
So
it would be more like.
But you're still eroding. Like, how do you build it?
So consider it like the Naval Academy, or where you go and you get free education for 4 years, and you have to give back X number of years. So if you take that pensions pause for
Right.
2 years, you've got to pay back an extra 4 years or 6 years. So you move the retirement needle up a few years, which we really need to do anyway.
Yeah,
So it's a nice way, it's both a carrot and a stick approach at the same time to getting people to extend their working lives, which is, I think, and I hear this kind of whininess all the time about, oh, people should have the opportunity to leave work when they want to. That's just not a reality anymore. Like, people have to work longer. It's just not a reality to be able to walk away at 60 years old and think, yeah, I've had it, I'm good.
But do you think people are walking away voluntarily?
Yes.
I mean, most of the research that I've seen are people wanting to work longer and not able to, both for health reasons and because they're pushed out of the work.
And another thing about working that, and this is going off away from your question a little bit, but I was talking to someone this weekend who was saying that she's sad that she's going back to the office because she's an older worker and she's really liked being a remote worker. And she said she said the teams, the younger people she works with, it's not what I said earlier about judging a book by its cover. She said what makes her feel so uncomfortable at work is that the younger workers are like this clique, and they don't include her in their sort of water cooler conversations. And even if they do, she doesn't really understand exactly what they're talking about, because they talk in these half sentences and then they finish at the other person, and they're often they're talking about things that she's not up on. And she said it's like you're the unpopular kid not getting picked for the team when you get these these childhood feelings of being unpopular and the person cut out. And so it's this emotional thing about being in a workplace like that makes you want to say, I don't want to go to work. I feel it makes me feel bad. I know, is that
no, it's absolutely true. But I think when we talk about, I think that the underlying theme here is that it's very hard for us as human beings to see long term. And Laura Carstensen, who runs the Longevity Center at Stanford University, always puts it so well, and I'm paraphrasing what she says here, but she says something to the effect of, we're really good at seeing 2 minutes from now. We all know what's going to happen roughly in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
We're pretty good at 2 hours. 2 weeks, things start to get a little hazy. 2 years, it's really murky. 20 years?
Yeah.
None of us can see 20
That's why
years.
people don't save for retirement.
And that's why people don't save for retirement.
I mean, I had that thing, I cashed out my retirement plan because I needed the money then.
Yeah, I think the high note on this though is because the retirement landscape has shifted so much, younger generations are saving at higher rates. They're
Yes,
saving whatever they
definitely
can, whenever they can.
No, they're much better, and they're investing.
And they're investing, and
Yeah.
Gen Z, Jesus, they
No.
save money.
Fidelity
They
came
save
out with
every
this.
cent.
Yeah, yeah.
The piece that I'm talking about is like this idea of
$100 to hire
the
somebody.
benefit. So like, if you take a look at, for example, the United Kingdom has aging older workers as part of their diversity assessment. So if you're going after a contract in the United Kingdom with the government,
Yeah.
age is a diversity qualifier. So, just as much as race or sexuality
Yes,
or
that's
gender.
it.
That's interesting. That's actually very interesting to say, yes, I have generational diversity in my workforce.
And also-
That's cool.
And like for federal
Yeah.
contracts now, like if you're a women business owner,
Yes.
you can get certified as a woman business owner, you have a better chance of getting a government
Yeah.
contract job, or
Yeah.
lots of things like, or even getting grants if you're certified. So if you could have age fit into that same sort of
Yeah.
equation, wouldn't that be cool?
But I-
Because there's something like, Jeff gave me a stat, it was very different than I think a stat you had in your book, but whatever it is, it's less than half, right, of HR, diversity and inclusion programs have age
None of
as
them do.
part of
It's
the
not,
program.
it's
Like,
not part-
something like 8%.
And the other hiring thing that we should talk about just quickly is the aging, when you just said about HR managers, is that most HR managers are in their 40s, right? And so they tend to hire people they think they look to people, their peers, to
Yeah.
hire in their colleagues. So that the older workers get shut out a lot because they're not in that sweet spot. And so they think the 35 to 45 is like the optimal. I think it's 35 to 40 is like the
you're absolutely
optimal
right.
age.
You're absolutely right.
And it's because that's who they think, because that's how they are. It's just a sort of a part of the hiring process. The other two things I would say also that could be done that aren't big and bold and crazy, but they're possible and they haven't been done, is the American Job Centers, which is the one career stops. There are 2,400 of them around the country, and they're all focused on getting full-time jobs and mostly younger workers. They don't do anything for older workers, and they have nothing in place to help you if you want to be self-employed, if you're doing these kind of things. So if we could get those to offer resources right now, that's career counseling, it's helping you do your resume, it's helping you find it's practicing interviewing. These are all things, if you haven't had to do those things in 20 or 30 years, you need help. You need someone to help you with your resume, and it's free. And it's the Department of Labor, and they could just and I testified before the Senate, and I said this back, a couple years ago. I said, this has to happen. I mean, they have to make it an opportunity for older workers to find training, to find skills training, to help with all those things that for free, that the younger, that's out there, these career centers. So I think that's important. The other one, and this is not my idea, it's, and I mispronounced her name, so Teresa Galducci from the Newsweek.
Yeah.
Her idea is we need an older workers bureau.
Yeah.
Say it again.
Bureau.
We need she's great and smart and everything, and she said we need an older workers bureau through the Department of Labor also that we've never had, and a bureau that really cares, that looks like the consumer bureau we have there now that cares about consumers. We need someone to care about older workers who can really pay attention to fighting, how do we need to change these age discrimination, you cover this a lot, Bradley. I mean, what can be done? We need to modernize these laws. We need somebody who's our advocate that's truly there.
Yeah,
right?
the laws are silly. The laws are absolutely silly.
Yeah,
They're foolish.
So what do you think?
They
I mean,
are
I think her
Yeah.
idea is brilliant. There's
I mean,
nothing-
I also think if there was one, I mean, in addition to the pensions pods, it gets to a larger conversation about breaking the back of the education system in this country,
Yeah.
and frankly around the world. Our entire education system is based on a medieval model. That's insane. That's insane.
Yep.
The entire education system is based on that. And it's based on a period of time where people's average age was 35, average life expectancy was 35.
And then things are changing so
And
fast.
things change so fast.
Technology.
I mean, I can't even think about what 10 years ago looked like. I mean, it was a
didn't have your
different
cell phone.
world. You didn't have your cell phone, certainly not a smartphone that had any power to it. Now we have the world, literally the world at our fingertips. And if you don't keep up, you are left in the dark, in the dust.
What's I think has come out of the technology, a good thing, and through the pandemic we found all these great resources online.
Yeah.
That it's virtual learning is here, it's good, it's reality, it's getting better every day.
Mhm.
But we need to have on-ramps and gateways for older workers to access it.
Yep.
To find, and a big thing that's a problem, and I always thought community colleges would be great education because they have the system in place, because employers need to tell us what exactly do you want us to know?
Well,
They said we can't find
Yeah.
them, but we don't. But what is it you want?
Yeah. So Kerry and I are both from Pittsburgh. We're both native daughters and a daughter and son of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And Kerry and I both saw the value of the community colleges in transforming an economy.
Oh, huge.
From steel to
now
healthcare
tech.
and education, and now tech.
Yeah, it's
If
just
it
the city
wasn't
is so
community
vibrant.
colleges,
Yep.
if they weren't there, and they are the great linchpin in all of this.
I agree. I
If
think
we're
it's
able to
brilliant.
activate community colleges in a meaningful way,
Get employers to
And
care
get
about them,
employers
because
there.
they do that. They did that in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
I have two boring questions that I want to ask. One I want to ask practically is how do we compel or get some of these things to actually happen? But we were talking about advocates and advocates for older people, older workers. I would be remiss in not asking you, Bradley, about the big kahuna of advocates. So you worked for AARP for 9 years.
Yeah.
Let's spill the tea.
It was 15 years.
Whoa,
15 years. Yeah.
So I'd love to get your take on how they're doing their job as advocates for people 50 and older. Are they out of touch? Are they out of touch with the realities of financial security for the demographic? Is their overall approach outdated?
Yeah, I mean, I think
what's going on there?
I think the grouping of 50 plus as a population, as a single population that you advocate for, is crazy. Because we know that as we age, as we get into older age groups, we actually see greater diversity in our health status, greater diversity in our economic status, greater diversity in the way we're approaching work. And because the life course has shifted so much, it's not unusual to see 50-year-old parents, first-time parents with young kids, and also 50-year-old people that are grandparents in some cases. So I think there's this weird conversation point around the 50 plus that I find really problematic, and I think Eric does a lot of really wonderful work, especially within their research group. But I think there's this weird kind of fight that's happening internally over discussing the realities of later life. on one hand, and I think it was Tom when we were talking earlier said, you know, the 50 plus population has all this wealth. Well, that's true, and ARP says that all the time. You know, it's the single greatest economy, it's the third largest economy in the world, the 50 plus. Well, that doesn't really tell the whole story, because out of the other side of their mouth, they're saying 6 million Americans over the age of 50 go hungry every night. So it's not one or the other. There's a truth there that sits in between, and I'd like to see an organization like them say, yeah, we really do need to tackle this. But even in the reconsideration of the Age Discrimination and Employment Act, which they're working on right now, they haven't moved the needle on 40 being the start of ageism, of protectionism in the workplace. And that says that they're working on a 1967 mentality.
Yeah.
They haven't updated it for the modern age. And if you look at places where where countries in particular have been progressive in this regard, I point directly at the country of Germany, where they've said, okay, ageism is actually something that affects multiple age groups. It's not just older workers. Younger workers can be discriminated against too. The question about ARP,
Yeah.
I think they're doing a lot of good stuff, but I think that their approach is outdated. I think that they as an organization, while they do a lot of good, a lot of it's stuck in kind of a weird limbo of a world that doesn't exist anymore versus a world that is emerging.
Because they're not recognizing the diversity of the population, or,
Well,
you know,
I mean, if you're bringing in $2 billion a year in revenue, which is essentially what ARP brings in each year, their membership is held steady at 38 million people. There's little impetus, there's little reason to change. When I started at ARP, I started in 2004. 2004 I started there, and by 2005 ARP was 40 million members, so 2 million more than it is today. At that time, the over 50 population was about 80 million. So there was 50% of the population over the age of 50 was a member of ARP. Today that number is 38 million. And the size of the 50 plus population in this country has exploded. So ARP is now only about 33% of the 50 plus population, I believe. So they've actually lost market share.
And I think there's an issue, and I don't know enough about their business inside of it, but I've also done a lot of work with them. They co-branded many of my books. Is that the rural America doesn't always, their message doesn't resonate with them.
Yeah.
They're missing out on this huge population. Issues there, and so some of the things that the Washington efforts and their lobbying efforts don't resonate with this group.
And there is, let me be clear on this. This is a larger societal problem. ARP is just one kind of symptom in this. We have, because of the way where business is, where corporate headquarters are, where the government is, this idea of coastal elites, it is actually a real thing. We're not resonating with what are actually the real pain points of the middle of the country. We're not resonating in any way, in any shape or form with the realities that they have to face. And that's hurting us dearly.
is there something specific in that to this demographic?
They're the leftovers. They're the leftovers. They've lost their economies, they've lost their schools, they've lost their hospitals, they've lost their Main Street.
If you go
Now
to
they're
some of
losing
these
their
towns,
Walmarts.
there's just nothing. You know, these towns
And
just
they have, and somebody said to me the other day, well, they should just move.
right, yeah, really.
Where are they gonna go? There's no value in their property anymore.
That's right.
It's literally worth nothing.
Yeah.
We expect them to just pick up and move to a city.
Yeah.
They're, in many ways, older rural adults have seen their world erase around them.
Yeah.
And it's heartbreaking.
Their downtowns are
The big, what government and what companies can do, I wanna move us to individuals. So, sometimes I worry because we want to give people advice and we want to keep them feeling positive in the face of challenges and goal-oriented. But I wonder sometimes if we don't hammer home some of the challenges that people are going to face, like the running out of money. I mean, it's tough out there. Ageism is real.
Yep.
I find many more people, even though I know many people anecdotally, and I think it's backed up by stats who do want to quit and are ready to retire early. I see many more people who are pushed out, who want jobs and can't get them, and when they do get them, they are for a much lower salary than they were making before. It's just not sustainable. So with all of that big stew,
Yep.
let's talk about some practical advice. You know, what's just as I said, the sort of big, bold company thing, what are some of the most important things?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think number one for me, if you're not learning, you're not earning. Like, you have to be very proactive, because the equation has shifted, okay? So we've rebalanced risk over time, where government and institutions handled a lot of the risk. Retirement savings, in particular, was one of them. But education is something that you're going to need to keep up on. And I do think that businesses, big businesses at least, big corporations, have done a good job of at least putting these tools in place, learning how to upskill on tech, learning how to write, learning how to speak. All these tools are in place within corporations, but I think people, once again, keep getting caught up in the now versus thinking about the next. Oh, I'll take that maybe next month or next quarter or next year. You have to keep those skills up. You have to keep those skills up. Also, it's not just about income. If you leave the workforce, you're gonna get sick. Period. You will become more and more isolated over time, and that will lead to poorer health outcomes. Period.
Yeah,
There's no debating
it's
that.
true. Yeah, the mental health aspect and the socialization is just imperative.
Imperative.
You know, and people don't put that in the equation.
And
Basically, what Bradley said is correct. Learning is fundamental, as they say.
Yes.
You absolutely, and it's not.
Somebody should
And
do
it's
that.
also, they should. It's also raising your hand, asking for new duties. A lot of times when we're in the workplace, not looking for a job, but you're in the workplace, and you're just keeping your head down because you don't want to get noticed, because you don't want to be on the firing line, you don't want to be the next one to go. So you just do your job, you try to get it done. Instead of saying, you know, I'm going to take a stretch, I'm going to volunteer to take on that project because it's a little scary, you might not know how to do it. But, or, you know, say I want to be a part of that workplace development program and just be a little noisy. But people don't want to draw attention to themselves, and they lose because of that, because they miss out on the opportunity to be a little scared, get the adrenaline going, and get noticed for doing a great job. So that's one thing in the workplace. Out of the workplace, you're trying to get a job. Everyone keeps trying to replicate their old job. You aren't going to do that. Your job is probably gone. So what you have to do is find something adjacent to it. Something, you know, shift up your mind, be creative, be curious. What else do I want to do with my skill set? I'm not saying you have to reinvent yourself, but people get stuck in a moment, like Bono sings, you know, they just get stuck in a moment and they just don't know how to get out of it. And so they want that same job. They want to, and it's no longer they need to broaden what they're looking for and be willing. And I hear so many people get so upset, oh, the pay, they just don't, they get all tied in knots about pay. Okay, get over it. You're not going to get paid what you got paid before. And if you change careers, I can guarantee you're not going to make the money you made before initially. But you need to get back in that door, and that's how you're going to learn new skills. That's how you're going to stay on top of what's happening in your industry, is when you have a job, you learn the skills. And then you move back, you can navigate. But if you just wait for that perfect job 100% to land in your lap, it's not going to happen.
Just two things I want to underscore that you said. First of all, I love the practicality of it. Just get over it.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there are certain things that are just, you know, that are your new reality, and just get with the program about it. Also, I've never heard it said this way, but I see it all the time. Older workers who are trying to replicate their old job, replicate what the goals were, and you know, I'm thinking now in particular of one colleague, but he is representative of a lot of what I see. You know, we used to do it this way. It worked really, really well, and you know what? It did.
And again, this is basic 101 job hunting advice is use your network.
Yeah.
And I always say networking is one letter away from not working. And if you absolutely don't get out and use
That's
your network,
good.
That's
because
really good.
you cannot get, employers hire the way they always did. We just talked about the AI stuff. Okay, wonderful, wonderful. But frankly, they hire people they know or people they don't know. It's, if you don't know somebody at that company, you're not getting in for the interview.
Yeah.
And then when you get in the interview, then you can talk about what Bradley just said. You can say, you can show how, and I always tell people, the buzzword to use is you're curious. You know, that really
It's a big
fights
one.
ageism. If
Yeah.
you say you're curious, it just, some subliminally, it gets in that they think that you're learning.
Love
you're
it.
looking for-
Yeah.
So anyway, but the network is really critical. So I tell people, think about who do you want to work for? Who do you want to work for? This is your time. Think about it. What companies really, their mission, their product, whatever it is that you care about. Because when you wear that passion on your sleeve, if you can get into a company, they love that. Like if you talk to a hiring manager and you say, don't you love your job? And I'm like, why do you do this? And it shows through that you care about that product. That does a lot to help you land a job. And also, so you do that, then I have people say, okay, these are 10 companies I think are cool. Okay, who do you know there? Do your LinkedIn thing. Look at your Facebook friends. Look at whoever it is. Who do you know there? Who can help, or go out a couple of layers, but you've got to make a connection to that company.